Hi, I'm Matthew Hersberg, and this is the Myopia Mindset. This is the podcast that helps ECPs build success in myopia management. We do that through motivation, inspiration, and education. And my guest for this episode has been a source of all three for me personally and professionally. And I'm very excited to welcome him back on. Dr. Sukh Gill is one of the co founders of Doctor's Own Design, the next generation Ortho-K lens. He practices myopia management exclusively at the Orthokeratology Center of Washington, and he is a fellow of the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control. Suk, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, and I wanted to get you on for a deep interview. My episode with you guys announcing Doctor's Own Design and the Q&A we did is one of my most popular episodes, and there was so much great material about your origin stories and like your successes and failures and like what drove you to design the software and what brought you and Mark together. And I was like, man, I really want to get him back on the podcast for like a full interview. But before we do that, if anybody has any questions for you concerning anything we talk about in this episode or Doctor's Own Design, how can they get in touch with you online?
Oh, that's easy. Sgill at doctorsowndesign.com is probably the best way to get a hold of me. Just send me an email. I'm pretty easy to reach that way. I'm not too
Perfect.
complicated. I'm not as active on social media, but email is the best way to reach me.
Man, social media is a monster. Like you look at the way Brianna Rue does social media and you're like, geez, how does she ever stop moving? Like I cannot keep up. Like it is so like frustrating and impossibly imposing for me. I really struggle with it.
Yeah, it takes a lot of energy and dedication, and I guess that's not something I have.
Well, let's talk about what you do have because you have an orthokeratology practice where you're just doing myopia management. You have a great product in Doctor's Own Design. And I wanted to really get into your origin story, how you got into myopia management, how you got into Ortho-K, what got you to this point. But before we before we get to the beginning, why don't you give us an overview of what your practice looks like right now?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I guess a little bit of it is I my practice for the entire beginning of my career was sort of your average full scope practice. I did a little bit of everything. This current practice, we really just only focus on myopia management, but we try to make sure that we get as many aspects of that. I don't want to be the Ortho-K guy only, because some people that's not the correct solution for them. And so, wanted to make sure we had a full scope of everything available to us. So we do everything here, but I also wanted to support all of the doctors in the area. We don't have an optical. So when somebody does refer to us, we refer the patients back to them for optical, and we don't see the family. I only deal with just myopia management because that's really where my, you know, current love is. I'll say current love because that's not always the way it was.
Hmm.
And I just wanted to dive all the way into it. And so we have a small practice. We're about 950 square feet. So really small practice because I don't have an optical. We have a single exam room and we have a testing area and an area for contact lens training, things like that. And we don't need a big waiting room because there's really no waiting in our office. We do space the patients out quite a bit so that I can spend a lot of time with each one of my patients, which was really what I wanted to do. I was getting kind of sick of not having that connection with my patients.
Right.
So that's kind of really what the practice looks like. We have, two employees. My wife, Dr. Seema Bali Sharma, she runs all things operational with the business, and then we have staff that helps with the check-in process, pre-testing. It's usually only one staff member at a time, so
Hmm.
it's really a small little uh, small little business, if you will, and it feels kind of like a little home, like somebody's coming into our living room is kind of when we were kind of setting it up. That's what I wanted it to feel like. Somebody's coming to our home, and we're taking care of them here. So
Right.
I don't know if that kind of explains it, but it's a small little practice. I don't know if you've been here. It would have been great if you were able to come visit.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like how I met you was like I knew you through AAOMC, obviously, and then when I was with J&J and with the Ability Lens, you were on my list of potential accounts that I could work with, and so I definitely came out to visit you, but I think I screwed up our original appointment because you were at two different locations, I think, and I
Yes,
went
yes,
out to
that's what
like
it was.
yeah, and it's like I drove, I left early so I wouldn't be late, and I drove all the way out to, like, Kirkland or something, and then I got there, and I was like, "Alright, I'm here to see Doctor Gill," and they're like, "Oh, he's not here," and I was like, "What do you mean he's not here?" And then I'm, like, looking at the schedule about how long it's gonna take me to get to where you
Yeah.
actually were, and I was, like, texting you and be like, "I am so sorry, I'm so embarrassed, terrible first impression," and you were totally cool with it, and, but I never got to see, like, because I remember you originally talking about you and your wife were talking about, like, your plans to set it up, and I
Yeah.
was like, "This is so smart." Like, docs in your position, like, with you and your wife, where it's like, you can like, kind of tailor the practice around, like, what's been working for you, what you think will work. The idea of not having the optical is absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I'm sure it makes those referral conversations easier. Is that would that be accurate?
Absolutely. It just, I mean, I think so. Just to go back to when you actually did come that time, that was right when we were transitioning from our other two practices because we had two practices that were full scope, and you were still setting this location up, so you wouldn't
Mm,
have been able to see it at that point, but we were still in the works with that, and that's kind of what was going on there, and that was part of the conversation was we have these two full scope practices. We weren't getting a lot of referrals. I was doing a lot of dry eyes, a lot of disease. We just weren't getting a lot of referrals because I think there was this idea that if we refer the patient to you, you're going to take the patient for all services, which is also kind of a difficult thing to do. Is to tell the patient, no, I have this full other service here. I have an optical here. Please go back to your doctor.
mhm,
They want to take care of you. They've been taking care of you for your entire life. I'm just here to deal with this one thing. It's a tough conversation sometimes to have,
right.
but we wanted to eliminate that. And that's kind of why we didn't bring the optical in at all. We didn't want that complication of it. It really was a matter of almost trimming the fat. What were the
Mhm,
things that we didn't want to do, but it would at least facilitate that conversation with a referring doctor that we're here to do this piece of your business, not all of it. So it
yeah.
does make that conversation a lot easier.
Yeah, and the lack of OD to OD referrals, as Paul Levine says, it is the biggest crime in optometry. Why is like I haven't seen this in any other aspect of healthcare, and I repeat this over and over and over again. Why is this a part of optometry? Like, why are optometrists scared to, refer their patients? If I went to a doctor and they said, here's what's going on with you, like, I'm going to refer you to a specialist, like, that just seems like the natural course of action. It would almost seem to be malpractice if they were like, "Well, I know you have something that should be looked into, but I'm not going to refer you because I don't wanna lose your business." So it's like, why do we suffer from this problem in optometry, do you think?
Well, I mean, if you look at any of the other, let's just talk about healthcare in general. It is very segmented, right? Here's your specialist for your cardiologist is over here, your GI specialist might be over here, your neurologist over there, whatever that might be. It's in the definition. It's kind of split up that way. We as optometrists are our primary care.
Mhm.
And so we do a little bit of everything. And as we've expanded as a profession, even though we are primary care, we have little specialties because you can't be great at everything. You can be good at everything, but you can't be great at everything. You might have to pick a few things that you're great at, and that's, I think, where we're at right now is that we don't want to get that sense of, hey, we're missing out on this new, let's say, a scleral lens comes out, or dry eye or treatment, or something new comes out. You don't want to miss out on all that. You want to do
Hmm.
all of these things. Well, really, I think as optometry, and I hope to see this in the next 10 years or so. Is to see that we start becoming a little bit more specialized, have
Yep.
a group of different little specialties, and so we can take better care of our patients, is to have them go to the right person. But it just doesn't exist right now, and it hasn't been the case before. We've kind of been taught to take care of the whole patient, and it's hard to say that taking care of the whole patient might be sending them to somebody who's better at this one part of that, you know?
Right.
So I'm
They,
not sure if that's in everybody's mindset, or maybe it's just the way I was thinking. But that's my take on it. I think that's
yeah. Yeah, and I've heard this take, and I don't disagree with it. Like, your spin on it is very interesting, for sure. But my pushback on that, Sook, is that, like, in my limited experience in industry, because, like, I got really spoiled working with doctors like you at the AAOMC. I grew up in my dad's practice. I got used to the AAOMC style of doctor, that doctor who, like, cares so much about what they're seeing in their patients, that they challenge themselves to do something about it. And that means more work, more education. That means running up against the wall, failing, learning from your mistakes. And I just feel like, after my limited time in industry, I didn't really see that a lot in the average optometrist, not because they weren't capable of it, because I think every optometrist basically is. Well, maybe not every optometrist, but like 90% of optometrists are capable of becoming a specialist optometrist, in my opinion, because I think it's mostly trial and error and drive. But the majority of optometrists that I ran into just didn't have time or the opportunity to do that. They're working in these environments where it's like, whoever they're working for, whether that's a practice network or another doctor or big box or whatever, they're telling them you've got 15 to 20 minutes to see that patient. And specialty eye care takes longer than 15 to 20 minutes. So it's like, I get what you're saying, and I want that to be true, but I kind of have a little bit of trouble getting there, because the people who control the money in that situation, like, don't seem like they're really amenable to the specialty eye care model. Like, it just doesn't work with their profit structure. What do you think about that?
I'm trying to figure out a way to say this. And there was it's not too long ago, and that's why just going back to before I had this specialty practice. I was headed for burnout. That's just
Mm,
that's just the honest truth. I started to question. I was trying to see more patients and in different areas, and yes, we were chasing that reimbursement that we were getting from our insurance company, our allowances from them, and they kept going down, and we kept having a higher administrative burden. We'd have more staff, and it was a lot of work. And I would have to see a lot of patients, and I had to see them in shorter period of time. What started happening for me was started losing the connection to the patient. You
mm,
know, I've seen some of these kids when they were just little, and they were going into college, and it was something else to watch that journey. But I was starting to spend less and less time with them, so I never really, I enjoyed the conversation that I had with them,
yeah.
and that conversation time was being cut away from it, and that was taken away from the joy of my profession. And so when you kind of cut down like that, yes, you are always chasing that. So where's the time to learn a specialty, or figure out how to work it into your existing schedule? It's not easy. That was part of when we went to the specialty clinic setting, where it was like, this clinic, we do not take insurance, you know,
Mhm.
and that was because we didn't need. In my estimation was, I don't need a third party, I don't need that third person in the room between me and the patient telling us
Right.
how we can have our interaction. Uh,
Right.
I agree to something and the patient agrees to something, we should be able to take good care of 'em. And I feel like we do get a long time. Like I spend half an hour to an hour with a patient, you know? No, that
Mhm.
just doesn't happen when you're taking insurance. And I
Right.
spend that time mostly talking and getting to know the patient to make sure that I'm meeting the needs that they have. And how can you enter that into your, busy practice, as you say? I don't know if it's possible. I mean, I think almost like you need a day. This is going to
Mhm.
be a specialty day, whatever that specialty may be, whether it's dry eyes, whether it's myopia management. It's kind of hard to nestle it in between everything else you're doing. I'm not sure how people do that. And I was doing it before, but I don't know if I was doing as great a job of it. So to
Yeah.
become a specialist, I really did have to separate from that.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is, like, I think that most optometrists, if could do it, right? Like, I think that you have to have that motivation and drive and the ability to learn from your mistakes, you know, and it makes me wonder if the necessity of the situation is what will cause this to happen because, like you just said, there'll be more specialty in the future, and Carrie Herzberg, my dad, agrees with that. Lots of ODs in the myopia management sphere agree with that statement. So it's like maybe that moment comes from the burnout that you're describing. Like it's just this inevitable inevitable part of the journey of an optometrist is they see themselves spiraling out and burning out and then have to do something about it. You know, the time I grew up in was the time of private practice for sure, and there just isn't that much private practice with all of the debt that optometry students come out of school with for sure. So I'm wondering if like necessity kind of like reinvents private practice for the optometrists of the future where they're just like, I want something more than just like, your eyes got worse. I'll see you next year.
Yeah.
you know?
But I mean, and there's a lot to the whole, failing and getting up and dusting yourself off. I mean, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be in myopia management if it wasn't for that.
Hmm.
But I mean, I think we do have and you probably have more experience with this than I do. But with the new graduates coming out, man, they're well trained. They know a
Hmm.
lot of stuff. They know a lot more in depth about stuff that was really on just the beginning of, we were still treating dry eyes with artificial tears back then,
Right.
and we didn't even have, like a Restasis or something like that at that point. It was literally just we treat it with artificial tears. Here's the latest artificial tear that you can have, and they come out with a much more comprehensive understanding of it than we ever had. And so they're more, in my estimation, better positioned to start a specialty practice because they have a stronger foundation.
Yeah.
One of our missions with Doctor's Own Design is to kind of educate because there really still seems to be a a void
Hmm.
in education on myopia management, on Ortho-K for in specific. And we really do wanna have this, new group of people that are coming out, that are still curious to learn, to be educated. I would consider myself mostly self-taught,
Hmm.
and that shouldn't be the case. You're not gonna want to open a specialty practice if you don't have at least the basic understanding, of some of these concepts. And I would never have done that if I didn't have the trial and error situation that I had. And I think you know a little bit about the origin story that way.
Yeah, let's
Uh,
go more into that if you don't
yeah,
mind, because that's one of the things I wanted to specifically ask you about, like the self-taught aspect. Because, while I think most optometrists can find the drive and the resources to pursue a specialty, not everybody can do it at your level because, like, you have you have a math background, if I'm not mistaken. Like
yeah,
you think of this in a way that I think a lot of other optometrists don't, And like that's where really the cream is separated from the crop, so to speak, where it's like I don't think every optometrist could teach themselves how to do what you do. So like let's like how did that happen? Like walk us through the early stages of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that I woke up one day with this understanding that what I need to rid the world of myopia. I wish I could say I had that kind of a drive. That's not how it happened.
Yeah.
When we expanded about a practice from a retiring doctor. And that doctor was dabbling a little bit in Ortho-K, and I would say dabbling because I think that's what a lot of optometrists do. They dabble a little bit, they don't get anywhere with it, or they don't get the results or the sense of satisfaction out of it, and
Mhm.
it's abandoned. And it's
Mhm.
like, oh, that doesn't really work. That was me. That was me.
Mm.
Inherited these patients, and I was like, okay, so I've got to take care of these patients now. And I would see them and I was like, oh, they're 20/40, and I was like, that's not good enough. And the lens, I did the topography, the map of the cornea showed that the lens was not centered. That it just was not. It was a terrible fit. They weren't comfortable, and this was satisfactory. Chart after chart of a chart. This was sort of a satisfactory finish of the treatment, and it wasn't good enough for me. And
Mhm.
so the only thing I knew how to do was, okay, I had the manufacturer of the lens had a consultant, and so, "Hello, consultant, help me here. I don't know what I'm doing," right?
Right.
And that sort of sense of I am lost. I don't know what I'm doing here, completely dependent on the consultant, and then the consultant would make a change. I was doing, on average, 5 or 6 changes per patient. And even at the end of that, not getting a vision that I was super happy with because I was just defaulting to whatever the um, consultant was telling me without having the enough knowledge to question them or kind of engage with them and get the best out of them. So it wasn't,
Right.
I'm not saying it's all the consultant's fault or anything, but I didn't have enough ability to kind of have that communication. And it was at that point I was like, well, I'm not doing any of these patients a favor. I started looking in my area of where I was going to be sending all of them, and I was no longer going to do Ortho-K. And I said, okay, well, there was really not anyone close by. And I said, okay, well, let's do this. I'm going to give myself 6 months. It was sort of a personal challenge that I gave myself to learn how to do this properly, that I really needed to dig in. I had no knowledge AAOMC existed. I literally didn't know anything about it. I went online, I Googled a few things, and I was like, okay, so this is Ortho-K. And then I started digging a little bit more, and I was like, okay, okay. And I was trying to map it out in my head with my mathematical background, how the curves work, how the physiology and the physics of it all worked. Um, and I was trying to figure that out, and I did connect with another consultant, and that's our partner, Mark Cosgrove. And at that time, I'm just Mark probably won't want me to say this, but Mark was just a super kind guy. There was no reason for him to help me. It's not like I was bringing with me, hundreds of thousands of dollars of business and, all these patients or everything. I really was getting started. So why did he have to help me? He didn't. He really has a passion for it himself. And so he kind of, when I would question him, well, why is this? And he would give me the answer back. And, we'd go back and forth. And then I'd go back and do some more homework. And it was a little bit back and forth. But it was failure after failure on fits that drove me to go and say, okay, I've got to not be this. I got to learn it better. I can't keep doing this to my patients. That's what really drove my curiosity and mapping out all of these curves in my head, the mathematically how it all works. And it's at the end of the day, you've got to have somebody to hold your hand a little bit too. And hopefully that's what my sort of giving back will be with Doctor Zone Design is we'll be able to kind of work that education side of things to be the helping hand. We're not going to
Mhm.
do it for you, but we're going to make sure that you understand how to do it. That's kind
Yeah.
of what our goal is. I don't know if that
Yep.
kind of answered the question, but
No, that totally did because I mean, there are so many moments like that, in the Ortho-K circles specifically, but myopia management for sure. And Mark is definitely part of the origin story for a lot of fitters. Like I just had Dr. Marie Homa Palladino on the podcast, and I remember her saying, like, when she first started out, she was going through the exhibit hall of Vision by Design, talking with every company, just trying to find a good fit of who would be ideal to work with. And again, Mark Cosgrove came in they talked. She had a great feeling from him. She was asking him questions. He was so patient. He was, responding so well to her questions. She was learning. And then it started to transform into this like back and forth. And then as she gained knowledge and expertise, it became part of this like symbiotic relationship that they began to share. And so it's like so much of Ortho-K success has been around education and that personal connection, um, not just between consultant and practitioner, but from practitioner to practitioner as well. Like, why do you think that? Like, because I completely agree with you that we're kind of failing in the education department despite having all of these great resources that are available. Like that's why this podcast exists. We have a great meeting like Vision by Design. We have great resources like you guys over at Doctor's Own Design and Mark Cosgrove willing in his established history, your knowledge and experience and the willingness of Doctor's Own Design to be like, hey, we will work with you. We will teach you. But like why do we still have this education problem, do you think, in this industry where it's like so much money has been spent on educating doctors and their staff in order to develop a successful myopia management doc, but we just haven't seen this huge boom that everybody's been telling me is supposed to happen.
I mean, I have my thoughts on it, and that has to do with, you know, historically, doing an Ortho-K. I'm talking specifically about Ortho-K because that was really my origin story and myopia management aspect of it. I didn't learn about until later, right?
Mhm.
And so there's a lot to be, learned there as well. But speaking about Ortho-K, having zero experience with Ortho-K coming out of school, right? I didn't even know what to think of it. How would I, what is this curve? What is that curve? None of this stuff makes sense. And how come some lenses have 4 curves, some have, 6, and some have, 5? It just didn't, why? What is each of these things doing? There was nothing there, and
Mhm.
so I had to have the curiosity to go to AAOMC and learn this. But there's the friction there is this is hard. This is going to be difficult. And you go and you sit down in that exhibit hall and you see these legends up on the stage talking about how they've fit a minus 15 and
Yeah.
with 8 diopters of SIL or some crazy thing like that, and they did it by changing this and that, and all that serves is to make it feel even more harder. This
Right.
is more complicated. How that's not normal. And that's as you've seen with Doctor's Own Design, what the whole thing was is how do we simplify this? Because do we need to be that complicated? Do we
Right.
need to have full control over that? It's great to have it, especially if you can do it. I mean, it's really great to have full control over that. But does everybody need that? You know, if you're going to spread it to more people, you just have to make it a little bit more user friendly.
Right.
And that's kind of what I feel about it is let's simplify it. Let's make the education easier. Can we educate how you can fit the first 50% of your patients, let's say everybody up to a -2, with a perfectly healthy cornea 45, K or something like that, just the easier fits. Can
Right.
we do that first before we start running? Let's walk first. And I don't think that that's where the education was at. Boot camp is a great thing, but it's also you've got to have the initiative to go and attend Vision by Design's boot camp. I think is
Mhm.
great. It helped me after I was fitting to go back to the basics. It was a
Right.
huge help that way. But can we bring that education to people where they are? I don't. That's our goal. Can we bring
Mhm.
it to you in your home? So that's what we're trying to do here over at Doctor's Own Design. So we'll have some interesting stuff coming out, but
Yeah.
that's kind of
And
our
I
goal.
I
So we'll look it up.
I hope that, you and Josh and Mark will come on the podcast to talk about it. That would be awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. We love
so
talking with you.
the so like I agree with a lot of what you're saying. As someone who was heavily involved in the administrative aspect of Vision by Design and boot camp specifically, you know, how much time should we devote to it? How many days should it be? How much material should we be covering? What should the level of involvement with exhibitors be? How much how much communal time should we give the attendees? And I one of my fears about boot camp specifically over the years is that as more was coming out, it was just becoming a larger and larger pill for the new to myopia doctor to swallow. And especially now because it's not just Ortho-K anymore. Like maybe in some ways it was easier that it used to just be Ortho-K for the most part. But now you have all these other modalities, all these other factors, all these other considerations. And, what I would see in a lot of the docs who failed, or not failed, but like didn't really get it for boot camp, because I would try to stay on top of like, how was your experience here? And here's a survey. And if you wouldn't mind filling it out, and what did you get from it? And I do follow ups with docs who attended if they were open to it. And it's like, a lot of the ones where myopia just wasn't working, it was just because they'd go to the meetings like Vision by Design or GSLS or whatever. They would get so much, and then they would have to come home and transfer that directly into their practice, which was not set up to handle this new front load of information, system changes, the staff doesn't know what's going on. And so I like that you guys are taking an approach of like, how do we bring this to your home? How do we like focus this into like with Ortho-K? And how do we simplify this process and this education so that you don't feel like it's too intimidating? So like, I love everything that you said. I think that's exactly what the industry needs.
So let me ask you a question then. Let's say you're in charge of boot camp at this point, just the boot camp part. Would would you consider that maybe that's almost a separate entity now because it is becoming so many things? Would you be saying, "Hey, let's break this out into another thing"? I don't want to
Yeah.
get you. I don't
No,
upset
no,
anybody.
I'm happy to answer this question because this goes to something that like I was an advocate for. When I was still with the AAOMC, there was a lot of discussions back then about making the meeting more modular from the point of view of boot camp. So the idea was, why don't we hold boot camps, smaller meetings throughout the country, and they're more targeted, they're more focused, and then they feed into Vision by Design, which is like the big meeting because what I was reporting to the education committee and the board of directors was that like the new to myopia docs, the boot camp doctors, that was our best new demographic. We were getting so much increase in attendance for boot camp, but the conversion rate over to the general session after the first day, day and a half, 2 days was very, very low. Like that was unique to docs like you and my dad and Matthew Martin and that caliber of doc, your Caroline Kaukes and Brianna Ruse and Glenda Alamans, where it's like, they're so hungry for it. They learn about it in boot camp and then they immediately jump into the main meeting of Vision by Design and just are like sponges, but the vast majority of attendees for Vision by Design weren't like that. So even though it wasn't my idea to begin with, I was pushing for it hard to be like, let's try smaller, more targeted meetings that feed into a larger meeting because we know we're not going to convert them to general session anyway. So why don't we plan to convert them to general session in like a year or two after they've attended boot camp? So you go to boot camp and then the next VBD you may or may not go to, depending on when it is, but then we try to get you to the next one or the next one after that. So that's why I have no problem answering that because I wanted to separate it from the main Vision by Design structure because it just time was just something we didn't have. Like we were always struggling to figure out where we were going to put stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I would be one of those people who'd be sad to see it separated, but I think
Mm,
it is the right approach, because I love seeing all the new people that are coming in and,
mhm.
to kinda relive the time when I started it, and, so I would hate to not be able to see that group of people, but at the same
Right.
time, I think, to serve them best would be to almost to give them bite-sized portions, right?
Mhm.
That's my hope as far as what we bring out, hopefully as an educational system, is to make it a little bit more bite-sized, so it's
Yeah.
not a whole departure from what you're doing on your day-to-day activities. You still gotta, you still gotta pay your rent. You still gotta, do all that stuff. So to get up and go to a meeting, it's a commitment for a doctor to step away from their practice
Right.
and go learn that. And how many meetings do you want to go to? And which ones are you gonna check off? I mean, for me, Vision by Design is a no-brainer. I'm there.
Right.
No, but I'm a specialty myopia management practice. And part of that, in our education part, is we don't want, I mean, people will think like, okay, you're an Ortho-K company. All you ever want to talk about is Ortho-K, probably, right? And no, because we want to talk about myopia management. Our solution is not always the right one for every patient. So we should kind of be able to talk about all those different aspects of it. And if you find that there's a better solution because maybe that patient doesn't can't wear the Ortho-K lenses, atropine is a better option, or maybe a daytime lens, or even like myopia controlled glasses or something like that is better for them. Hey, I'm all for it. Eventually maybe they'll come back and do some Ortho-K and pay us back that way through the business. But it's really about lifting everything. I mean, bringing that awareness to everybody is really going to help us all, I think.
Right. It's the rising tide, right? Like, it
Yeah.
raises all ships, and I imagine that's why, not just because of passion, but I imagine that's why, docs like yourself and then Mark Cosgrove being so open to helping other docs because that's the culture. The goodwill isn't just like it's not just like I want to help others understand this and improve this community and grow the specialty as a whole or whatever. It's also you do know that that's going to come back. Like when I was with J&J, I kept telling them over and over again like this myopia is a people industry, like, it's all about the people. The docs need a personal touch, they need help, they need to understand what's going on with the lenses, like you were saying. They wanna be a part of the process, and then the way that you guys treat your patients, like you said, like, "I want you to feel like you're stepping into our living room, like, you're welcome here. We want a specific we wanna take care of you." And like from my point of view, that's the hallmark of the myopia industry is it's always about people. And when components of this industry forget that, I think that's when they start to fail. So like I applaud what you guys are doing because you're keeping like that element alive and well because I think that's really the only way we're going to make it moving forward.
Well, I think that's almost the entire, not specifically myopia management, that's the industry of healthcare in general. As soon
Mhm.
as we start losing sight of the fact that we're a people industry, um, we're replaceable by AI. That's just the way it
You think
is.
so? Hmm.
We have on a fairly regular basis. We're here in the Seattle area, right? We're in Kirkland, but we're in the Seattle general area. So we have a lot of tech. This is the home of Microsoft. We've got Google here. We've got Facebook. We've got a lot of tech people here. So they come in pre-educated.
Mm.
And here's the newest lovely thing doctors got to deal with. We're in the exam room with another party, which is ChatGPT.
Mhm.
I'm in the exam, doing the consultation, and they're asking the questions to ChatGPT. Well, what about this? Well, what about and so I'm getting
Yeah.
drilled with all these extra questions. But ChatGPT is not doing the exam. You know what I mean? That's just not happening. It's still me because at the end of the day, what the question is, how does all of this general information apply to me personally?
Mhm.
It needs to be personalized to that person. Okay, here's how let's say for I'm going to speak about myopia management. Here's what atropine does. I always present all options: atropine, daytime contacts, glasses, Ortho-K. Here's all how they all work. Here's what it's all about. And I'm that guy that's always shifting the conversation. I don't want to talk about the numbers on the prescription. I don't want to talk about the thickness of the glasses. We're talking about the length of your eye. That's what we're talking about. And these are the different treatments we have for that. Those treatments. Now, given that you and I sat here and talked a little bit about this, and I learned that you, patient, is a swimmer,
Mhm.
and you're really active. Maybe glasses are something that's frustrating you. Maybe that's not your option. Maybe atropine's a better option, but then you're still going to need something for vision correction. And so then we kind of go down that road, and I say, well, what gives you the ultimate freedom is going to be Ortho-K. And that's that personalized solution for that individual.
Right.
And we need to keep that in healthcare. Is to you're still going to want a personalized solution to whatever yours is. You don't want to have this general, I researched this and this is the treatment for me. It's you want to actually say, well, this is the things you didn't think about.
Yeah.
AI is not asking you about your lifestyle and what you do with your friends on the weekend or something like that, or how much sleep you're getting. And so a lot of those things kind of, you need to keep the human in the equation.
Yeah, and um I'm not a doomsayer about AI by any means because the way I see it, you always will need that personal connection. It's like, when self-driving cars was originally pushed forward, like there was huge advancements in self-driving cars. And a lot of people were like, "Oh, this is going to," and now they're saying this with AI, "This is going to remove the driver from like trucking or cabs or Uber or whatever the case may be." And it's like, I just don't see it yet. Like, I always feel like trucking companies are gonna wanna have a driver or a person in those self-driving trucks to make, because like, what if something happens? Like, you want someone on site that's gonna be able to handle it. Like, if there's a malfunction with the truck, like, it could just get stuck out in the middle of nowhere over
Yeah.
something stupid, right? But if you have a dedicated person inside that cab to be able to address whatever problem comes up, or even like they have to sit in the driver's seat and then take over if there's a problem. Um, and then the same thing goes, I think, in the medical model where I hope it means you'll have a more personal touch because AI will never be able to give you that personal interaction. They'll never have a Dr. Gill who is like, I want you to feel like you are welcome here and we're going to spend time with you and I'm going to get to know you. And this practice is owned and run by my wife and I, and it's a family business. And like, like I've been in so many practices where it's like they know, like they'll ask the patient about his golf game and then they'll joke around about
Yeah.
how bad it is, or they know about each other's kids, and like there's that relatable experience. So I think like going back to what you had said before, like maybe that's what like pushes specialty for optometry, is that specialty requires that human touch. Like at least for now. I don't know. What do you think?
I absolutely think so. I mean, what I'm starting to see more of is there's more awareness in myopia management space about it, about managing the axial length, all of that kind of stuff. So never did I have a question about do you measure axial length before
Mm,
during the consultation. I'm usually educating them. Now it's a commonplace where they're coming in asking for that, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely, we measure that. And so there is a lot of that kind of comes in with everything is a little bit of some pre-education and all that kind of stuff. But I'm getting people who are coming from other practices where they kind of dabble. They didn't have
mhm,
enough time. They didn't really understand. And they've been using Ortho-K for 2 years and they had no idea about it manages axial length is what we're trying to do. They have no idea about how it actually molds the eye or how the lenses should. They just know that this is the simple system I use to clean it. They don't know why I'm renewing lenses annually. They don't know why, so how is that possible? That aspect of things are missing. So, I mean, if you are a specialist, you should be educating. So I consider myself and I consider most of healthcare educators, right?
mhm,
What we're doing, we're educating that individual using our expertise.
right.
And, that's what really is the specialty, I think, and that's hopefully what will push it forward is that you are the specialist, you give me the answers that I, need, even if it's not what I want sometimes, but, you give them when I ask for them. And hopefully that would be something that pushes specialty care. I'm not sure. I don't think I know that, but that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah. And how did you develop your sense of expertise, especially being self-taught, in the beginning there and running into so much frustration? You're talking about 5 or 6 adjustments, or in the beginning you were actively about to look for someone to send your Ortho-K patients to. So, did you apply the same the same mindset to becoming the expert? Because I think, and you guys probably encounter this all the time. I mean, I know I do, is like docs just don't have the confidence to position themselves as the expert, which I think is really working against them, right? Because at the very least, if you're worried about this, if you're trying to do something about the myopia epidemic, you are positioning yourself to grow into that expertise. Like, how when did you start to feel like organically comfortable as an expert, like especially with Ortho-K?
I don't know if I'm always comfortable, and I think that's a good thing. I think
Mhm.
because I'm always questioning myself, right? And that I go and I find the answer. I kind of know where to find the answers now. It's kind of probably the best way to say it, and a lot of it has to do with the connections I've made over the years. I made some good friends through Vision by Design. Uh, Dr. Art Jung and Dr. Anish Patel. And we have a little group of our own that we discuss. Leah Johnson's in there as well too, and we discuss some of these, you know, cases we have in real time. And it's always like when I feel like I don't know, I'm not quite sure about this. Let me bounce it off somebody. It's really nice to have that. And so, not being comfortable is a good thing as far as I see it. But at the same time, you know, you should have some level of comfort that you know what you're doing. And I didn't have that until I went to, Vision by Design the very first time and I started connecting with people. And I realized that what I thought, and I think the reason I went so deep into learning is because I thought I was so far behind. I had no benchmark. I had no benchmark that this is, how much I should learn and then I should stop. you know, I just kept going. I kept going down that rabbit hole. And then when I went to the AOMC, I realized that it was a smaller group of people who were that nerdy. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
The rest were kind of very much more broad in their education. And so that's when I started to feel a little bit more confident about what I knew. And when I'd have those conversations, for example, there's a lot of things that I knew with the math that it's like, okay, people would ask me about the curves and stuff like that. We'd talk a little bit about the curves, and I was like, and they were like, oh, well, why don't you just change this to this? And I'm like, well, because that's great on paper, but it's not
Mhm.
physically possible to manufacture a lens like that. It's just not. And one of the greatest things, I don't know if I told you this, Matthew, is that we now are Aurora GP Lab Inc. We
Oh,
are
okay.
a full scope. We actually have our own lab. We've taken the manufacturing in house so that we could continue a little bit in the R&D area. We are manufacturing. So when you order a lens from us, we manufacture it ourselves too. We have a great team that Mark's been working with forever, and that's the easy part. We're doing full scope, the full RGP, sclerals, everything. But really, for the Ortho-K aspect of it, we're able to better understand that. And so when we have that conversation, and you're like, well, physically, you can't manufacture a lens that way because the curves interact in such a way that that would cause warpage in the lens, and
Mhm.
then it won't work the way you think it's going to work. Those conversations are when I started to realize maybe I know a little bit more than I think I know, and
Mm.
then I felt a little bit more confident as an expert. So, but again, I'm never fully confident. That's We have great colleagues, especially in myopia management, that are so willing to help and continue your learning.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great point to make. Like, maybe you should never really feel completely comfortable. Like, that always keeps you hungry to learn more. It always makes sure that you have, like, a check and balance with, like, what you're doing, like stand-up comedians say that, like, if I don't feel nervous going on stage, something's wrong. Like I'm going to have a bad set. And I wonder if that can also kind of apply to an Ortho-K practitioner, um,
Yep.
in the sense of like if I ever get to a point where I'm 100% comfortable all the time, something might be wrong because I'm not learning, I'm not
Well,
sharp.
hey, like they say, they call it a practice for a reason, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So, we're always learning. I I don't think there's a doctor that comes out of their education and is as good as they are 5 to 10 years later, right?
Yeah.
So that building of experience, and nobody says there's a cap to it, right?
Right.
Because it's always if the fields are always moving forward. There's always something new to learn, you
Right.
know, and there's always stuff to learn from. Which we learn more stuff about, I don't know, like the retina, and that applies to other aspects of the eye and stuff. So there's doesn't mean you have to be in this little silo either. You can bring your education from other aspects into this. It doesn't even have to be in healthcare. You can bring aspects from outside of it over, that's possible as well too.
What aspects from outside have you brought in specifically?
For me, it was the software side of things. You know, I when I when we started having conversations about it, just in general with people, I realized that everybody had their own formula in their head, right? Oh, well, I take this, I take half of that curve, and I add this, and they figured out a system that kind of works for them. And for me, I was like, well, this sounds to me like that's an algorithm, a software algorithm that
Right.
you've designed. That's your own algorithm, and when I first started with the software, that's kind of how it all worked out. Is I knew there was a software solution to it. We part of my background. I did some mathematical modeling, and part of my capstone was we did a mathematical modeling of the human cough. What happens to the throat size and everything when you cough? It was a little nerdy aspect, but it was part of that thing. And so I know that you can, even though you may not be able to replicate it 100%, you can be pretty darn close when you start doing some of these algorithms for let's say the way that people design lenses and how it matches up with the cornea. You can go super detailed if you want to, or you can find something that kind of meets 80, 90, 90% of the patient's corneas. And that's the aspect that I brought. I really enjoyed the building of the software part of it. And we're always expanding that as well too. So there's cool stuff that'll be hopefully coming out in the next year or so.
Yeah.
That'll bring some more things that are a little easier for people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm excited to have you guys on to talk about it when it's ready. Um, because I mean, like, I've seen the software, I've played around with it, and like, I'm not an optometrist. I've never designed lenses before. I've worked with some software systems in the past, and Doctor's Own Design just like took somebody who is basically as dumb as a box of rocks when it comes to designing a lens and just made it very simple and straightforward for me. And if I can make a lens in Doctor's Own Design, anybody can. Like, that's like but then there's so much, like, fine-tuning aspects to it, like, because I think that really speaks to, like, what you were saying earlier about, like, really zeroing in on those parts that are most important, especially for that brand new practitioner, but, like, let's not forget that there is that advanced designer element to it, especially
Mhm.
with your pedigree and with Mark's pedigree, behind it. So it's like, how did you like, because I can't imagine it was easy, especially in the beginning, to build a software system that basically is taking Mark's mind and like putting it
Yeah.
into a software system. I have to imagine that was exceptionally frustrating in the beginning. Like, how did you make something that would be so beginner friendly, but yet still offer the advanced fitter like enough satisfaction and precision? Like I'm so like, how did that happen?
Um, I think I have a simple mind. Maybe that's what it is. I think that I read something by Steve Jobs back, and it was talking about how making something simple is extremely difficult. All right.
Mm,
And that just almost that phrase itself, right? Make something simple is difficult. is says a lot in it. And I knew that there's just a few things that we were kind of tweaking, and I was trying to same way we did with this practice, right? Let me cut out all the stuff that I don't enjoy doing. Let me focus on those core things that I do like doing. And that's kind of what I did with the software. What are the core aspects of design? It may not be super nuanced for somebody who has an abnormal cornea, but what's going to meet 99% of the cases, or 95% of them. And I just kind of started trimming some of those things back. And then I would bounce the idea back and forth with Mark. And then Mark would test me kind of, well, here's this case, design the lens. And I would design a lens. And then he would say, well, this is what I would have designed. And so we had fun at the beginning, kind of playing up back and forth on that. And that's how, we came about to, well, do we really need all this other stuff? It was a lot of cutting out stuff that I thought wasn't necessary, for
Mhm.
the average person. And the math, the algorithm that drove everything that was the nightmare. That
Mhm.
was the tough part of it because it had to meet certain situations, that are you design differently for. And so that took me a long time. Had to go back and dig up my math books and kind of look in there. I was just looking over. I still have the stack of papers. I would sit on my kitchen table in the evenings with this personal challenge to solve that. And I had a stack of papers like about that thick, just sitting there. And I would then made it in sort of Excel just for myself to play with. It was never really something I was designing for everybody else kind of thing. It was just something to make my life a little easier in my practice, so I didn't have to spend all the time on the phone. Again,
Right.
another thing is trying to incorporate that into a busy practice is difficult, right? To do that, to do myopia management is difficult. Yeah, uh, balancing out between all the different aspects of what you're doing. So that puts you in the crucible of like, how do I make this simpler? Because I
Right.
need it to be simple. I don't have time. So maybe that was the thing that did it. Really, is that I was forced to do it.
Right. You had to establish the balance between your clinic and the company. Like, I can't imagine that would be easy at all. Like,
Yeah.
um, you're seeing patients every day while running the company. Like, has your it might be too early to tell with, the episode that we did together for the launch was April of 2025, if I'm not mistaken. But like,
Yeah.
has your clinical practice informed these adjustments or changes to the software and what you guys are doing? Like, have you learned new things now by trying to maintain that balance? Have you learned new things from using the software now that it's been out for a decent chunk of time?
In short, yes. More details. I think I've learned more in Ortho-K as time has gone on, period, with
Mm,
or without the company. The difference is now we have ways to test some of those theories, in real time. And
right.
now with the lab, we're able to, control the outcome of our product is a little bit more. And so I can make little tweaks to things and test it and see if this is something that, we can beta test or make sense. The biggest thing we're really big on is having full FDA compliance on all the stuff that we're doing. And we're trying to work within those parameters, make sure that we're making sure that we're in the regulatory green zone,
Mhm.
that we're ready to go. So we don't want to really go out and test a bunch of stuff just because we think it might work. It's we are very picky about that aspect, right? So there are certain things I could do in my clinic personally that I wouldn't do in the business.
Mhm.
So yes, we did. We have a lot of learnings that have come over time.
Right. And, in the same vein of like what you've been learning, like with a 90+% first fit success rate, like what I mean, I like what kind of cases don't fit into that the group that isn't in that 90%? Like, I've worked with or encountered other like lens design systems or software systems, and like I always feel like a caveat has to be set for, these systems where it's like, well, 90% first fit success. But then you get into the office and they're like, okay, well, this one didn't succeed in its first time. Okay, I guess that's the one, right? Well, the second patient didn't
Yeah.
either. Okay, well, the third patient didn't either. And meanwhile, that first and second patient are in one or two or three refits up to this point too. So it's like, um, what kind of are there any patients that don't like what are those profile types that don't fit into that 90+% first fit success rate?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you this. First of all, I think that maybe we're a little lower than that at this point as we get more users. And the
Mhm.
reason really comes down to the thing that we've been able to identify most is that whole garbage in, garbage out, right? We're not getting good quality refractions, good quality topography. Topography is the bigger one. Or like HVID, for example.
Mhm.
Depending on what machine you have, the same patient has different HVIDs. That doesn't even make sense. And it because there's a formula that the topographer is using to measure that.
Mhm.
Sometimes the best thing to do is just to grab a ruler and measure HVID.
Right.
Um, there's nothing wrong with going to older technology. But that's changing some of our success rates, is to get that. And so that's an education thing for us as well. That's our job to educate the practitioner on what is the shortcoming.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Go
there's
yeah.
no other than that, there's no real like, oh, everybody with a prescription like this will fail, or everyone with the difficult patients are still difficult. The flat Ks, they're still difficult. The high myopes, the limbus to limbus cell, they're all still difficult. But I think we do a really good job. I've been having, myself personally, I've been having a lot of success still with it, but I'm very picky on the data that goes in because I've learned that. I've made the mistakes, You learn from your mistakes, really.
Yeah, I mean, docs like you do, but like I mean, I remember when I worked with the Ability Lens, which was a software-based system, is a topography-based system. And I would try to explain this until I was blue in the face when I would work with an account. Like, look, we need immaculate topography capture here in order for you to get to this success rate, to get to these good results. Like, here's how this works. And then if we got a fit that didn't work out, and the doc would be like, well, what happened? I'd be like, well, let me see your topography images. And then there's all this missing data at the top here, and then that's like you could tell that like they should have put some drops in first, and like the lids could have been better open, the positioning was bad, take your pick, all of the
Yeah,
above. And it's like, well, this is the reason why it didn't work. And I've that's why part of the reason why I'm asking this question is because you know, I don't understand what the barrier is, like, if I like and it makes me, like it reminds me about that saying that, like because Carrie says, like, 80% of the cases will be done by 20% of the fitters when it comes to Ortho-K
mhm,
specifically, and, it makes me concerned that that's just gonna be where Ortho-K is, like, even though you have a product that basically, if you think about it, works on like 80% of patients and works really well too. Like I saw bad topography captures produce ability lenses that did amazing results. You know what I mean? Like I saw, and I've seen it on many different designs, many different products. Like this shouldn't have worked, but it did. So, what is this barrier to entry when it comes to Ortho K then for optometrists who are, as we're saying, is just dabbling in it? Like,
yeah.
why isn't this working the way it should?
So I feel that you're talking about certain softwares, right? And I don't want to put them all in one basket, right? But there are certain softwares that are great when you have a great topography, right?
Mhm,
So you can say they're, topography driven software, right? Then that takes it takes the doctor aspect out of it. That's the objective, right? Is that if you can get a good image, we'll take it from there, right? That's kind of the message that's being sent. We 100% don't believe that. I don't. I we are 100% doctor centric.
Mhm.
It's doctor driven software. We're giving you a tool that you can use to design your lens, not the other
Right.
way around. We're not designing it for you. What we're so I've had several cases where I've had other doctors who have done topography, and they're like, "We just couldn't get a good topography on this kid. He kept blinking." We tried him in a different lens because it was topography driven, and here's the results. We want to try something else. Do you think you could do this? And I'm like, yes, we can give it a shot. Let's see what happens. And it comes out fantastic. Like you said, in your case, Ability did the same thing too in certain cases. So, but where to increase that success rate, we need good data, right? It'll always work in certain situations, but if you want to have a higher success rate or more repeatability, you really need good data. And that's kind of where that's at. But if we take the doctor aspect out of it, then the troubleshooting becomes a problem, right? If it's all driven by this software and then the lens doesn't work, the doctor the doctor feels stupid. And I'm
Mhm.
from personal experience. You know, you're sitting there, you're like, what went wrong? It's supposed to have worked. Now, how do I fix this? Because I don't know what went wrong. Why didn't it work? And you're sitting there in this loop where you're trying to solve a problem that you don't really understand why it's there. And hopefully we're keeping people in the loop with why the software is designing it in a certain way, and then just worry about these aspects because the rest of it aren't going to be changeable. So you just change the aspects that are going to make the difference. Um, that's my hope. Is hopefully that'll make it a little easier for you know adopting the software and adopting into getting into Ortho-K. Is maybe we remove some of that complication. I mean, I keep coming back to the same thing, but that's and I'm not trying to solve every difficult, 1% of, the cases that are so difficult we can't do it. I'm trying to get most people taken care of. And that's why I'm trying to simplify things, make it as simple as possible for the average practitioner. That's
Yeah.
that's the hope. I don't know if that kind of was what you're thinking about, but that's kind of what I
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, I love everything that you said because that rings so true with my personal experience around, when I was with J&J, my best accounts were the ones where the doctor and the s and the staff had a better understanding of what was happening. Like, we had amazing, advanced consultation team that, once things went wrong, because like, my role was to be like the first line of defense, right? Like, as you mentioned, did you measure HVID? Can we improve your topography? Is this fitting too loose or too steep or whatever the case may be? The fundamentals of how Ortho-K lenses work. And so when I can kind of pick out what the problem is, either I can help you solve it with the basic fundamental aspects, or I could push you over to the advanced clinical team to really get dialed into it. And one of the biggest points of disconnect for a lot if not most of my accounts is they were just hungry for more information,
Yeah.
and if they weren't getting it, it was really disconnecting them from the entire process, and I was watching their motivation get killed to continue because they simply didn't know what was going on. So to your point, like, even if like an advanced team could solve that problem for them and the idea was like, "Oh, you gave us a topography, cool, here's your lens, done and done." The disconnect for the practitioner and, if I'm being honest, for some of their core staff too, was just completely demoralizing for them. And like, it's one there are those docs where it's like, I just want it to work. I'm busy. If it's working, I'm
Yeah.
successful. My patients are happy, so be it. And more power to them. But that wasn't the vast majority of the accounts that I worked with. My best accounts were ones that I sat down with and spent extra time with them and their staff members. I was great with staff members. I was like, "Hey, do you want to understand Ortho-K from a staff perspective? We don't have to go like get super advanced. I can just show you what's happening so that you can assist your doctor." And it's like when I did that, you saw HVID measurements improve. you saw topography capture improved. You saw all these essential elements start to get better. So it's like, I completely agree with what you're saying. Like, by this element of like, let's make it so easy on the doctor that they don't have to even really think about it, I think is counterproductive for a big percentage of docs who are interested in doing Ortho-K. So
Yeah, you still gotta have them in the driver's seat is the way I see it,
they should be, right?
we're
Yeah,
we're the co-pilot, right? I mean, let me ask you this then, in that situation, how many times would you, as an advisor to them, advise them to look elsewhere? You know, like, maybe this isn't the correct solution. Maybe you need to go try this other lens or this other thing, in this case, not for all cases, but, would that ever happen? Would you ever advise them
yeah.
to try something different?
I would, yeah, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this. I mean, I don't work there anymore, but
Yeah,
there was cases where I was like, you may wanna seek out a different, product, because of the following circumstances. Now, in a lot of cases, that was very easy because maybe the patient had requirements that were beyond the parameters of
yeah,
ability, and then that's an easy thing to say, "Hey, you're gonna wanna seek out a different, lens option for this patient because ability is just not the solution for this patient." But there were a couple of cases where it was like, you may find like success with a different lens. I wasn't purposely trying to send them to other companies because I didn't want to get in trouble and lose my job, but coming from like working with AAOMC doctors, I kept stating over and over again, it's important to have as many tools in the toolbox. And I've never seen any one Ortho-K lens solve all problems. And you should be familiar with everything that's out there. You should be familiar with peripheral defocus soft lenses, atropine, everything. You should
yeah,
know what's available to you, and you should be an expert in as many different modalities as you can. So, like, without getting myself into too much trouble, like, I definitely did bring it up if it was appropriate,
yeah.
but the majority of those cases were for ones that were outside the parameters of ability to begin with.
So it kind of comes full circle to what you had asked me earlier.
Mhm.
Why are optometrists not ready to refer to other optometrists? Well, if our if we're in the industry and we're not ready to refer to another industry expert, we're doing the same thing, right? And Mark will be the first one to tell you that, if there's something outside of there and there's a better solution, we're going to tell you to go there.
Mhm.
There's room for everybody, right? Um, in without saying too much, let's just put it this way. I don't think that's not universal by any means. I have personally have been blocked from using certain lenses because I own this company. They're refusing
Mm.
to let me use their lenses, and that's not right for my patients. And I don't believe that we'll ever do that on our end as well, because we're here to help. There's an end point to us, and that's the patient. It's not just the doctor. It's not just money in our pocket kind of a thing. We're
Right.
we're trying to get that out there, and if we aren't willing to refer somebody to another company or another product or another treatment, um, then how could we ask, other optometrists to refer to the specialist? It's the same thing.
Suk, if anybody has any questions for you or wants some more information about Doctor's Own Design, how can they do so online?
Yeah, just the email is still the best place to do it. Or you can, it would be sgill at Doctors Own Design. That's doctors with an S, owndesign.com.
Perfect. And for my part, the myopia mindset is my main gig. It's how I help support my family. I'm a stay-at-home dad with a podcast, basically. And we survive solely on the support of our subscribers via our Substack. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider becoming a paid subscriber of the Myopia Mindset. You can do so on our Substack, myopiamindset.substack.com. It's just $12 a month, which is basically the price of a cup of coffee each and every week. And I keep saying over and over again, if you would buy me a cup of coffee to nerd out about myopia and Ortho-K and have on amazing guests like Suk and all of the other great docs and academics and industry experts, we all like eat, breathe, and live this stuff. And if that's who you are as well, please consider becoming a subscriber. Myopia mindset.substack.com is how you do so. Oh, Sook, we've we've spent so much time talking with you goes by so fast. Like I love it. Um,
Likewise.
I can't wait to have the team from Doctor's Own Design back on. I'm excited to hear about what y'all are doing, and it like I also want to hear about how like this time has gone and lessons learned and everything from like the team perspective.
Yeah. I mean, this is a big year for us. You'll hear about a lot of new things. So hopefully we'll be back to, announce it with you.
Awesome. I look forward to that. So, all right. Well, until then, Sook, thanks for coming on the show. And for everybody else, we'll see you at the next one.
Hey, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.